My biggest unlocking move is when I realized that I was the bottleneck. In early 2000, I got a call from my father. He was living in Munich, Germany at the time, and he told me that he was diagnosed with cancer and that the doctors had given him 6 months to live. So I did what any son would do. I went to my team, my executive team, and I said, listen, I'm going to go to Munich, and I need to spend time with my father. The cancer did end up taking his life, not until 8 years later. So we had more time with him than the doctors initially thought, which was a gift. Right? Within a period of 6 months, we lost half of our customers. We had a big concentration of customers that were startups because they were heavily VC funded. They had all the money they needed. Our services were willing to pay any premium for what we could offer. And then so many other businesses just decided to, okay, we're going to tighten our belts. The first thing that goes are IT projects. I had to lay off about a third of the company. This was hard, because everybody was a friend. We had a really amazing culture. I knew everybody's name. I knew their kids' names. I knew their spouse's name. And I made every call myself one weekend, and it was brutal. But when I came back to Catapult Systems, well, things weren't just running well, they were running better than when I left. It took a slap in the face for me to be gone for a while to come back and realize, man, I had been holding this company back. And it's not that I wanted to, it's not that I wanted to be a micromanager, but I was so used to it. And people were just used to coming and asking for permission all the time.
Welcome to Unlocking Moves, where we want to cover those key pivotal moments and decision points that really change the lives of successful entrepreneurs and leaders. But Sam, I want to hear your stories because I think we learn the most from stories. But not just your glory stories. I want to hear your gory stories because, as I like to say, the bigger the shit show, the bigger the lesson. My guest today is Sam Goodner, and I don't think he has any shit shows because he is the most detail-oriented, organized, and reliable people that I know. He runs like a Swiss clock. He was in the Swiss Army, so maybe there's a correlation there. And we're going to get into all that and more on this episode of Unlocking Moves. But Sam, before we get to that, I think I like to hit my guests up with an off-the-wall question to
hit me.
Keep them on their toes, keep my audience on their toes. So you're already ready. You already know the play. Okay.
We'll see where this goes.
So here's the scoop. You wrote a book called Clockwork, which, as we said, very relatable to the operational efficiency of the Swiss Army and of Sam Goodner. I also understand that you recently did the voice work for Like Clockwork, which I know from my experience with Who's Your Mic, it was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. And so that's my question. How did it go for you? Tell me that story about reading your own book, which is a lot harder than it sounds.
So yes, and the book is called Like Clockwork, and I did do my own audiobook, which was frankly harder than writing the book, I think. My publisher warned me ahead of time, listen, if you want to do your own work, you probably should take some acting classes. And I'm like, okay, sign me up. So I for several weeks leading up to the recording sessions, I did some work with an actress in New York that works with first-time authors like you.
Really?
And it was so helpful. But yet. So it was 5 days locked in a studio right here in Austin with, as you know, there's a sound engineer behind a thick, pane of glass. And you're reading your own book on an iPad, so it doesn't make that shuffle sound. And every time you flub, which, as it turns out, is all the time, they interrupt you. They say, let's go back and do that. So 2 things that I remember from that. Number one, if I do it again, I'm never signing up for a full day of recording ever again, because 3 hours is fine. 6 hours it's daunting. And as I've come to find out, there are words in my own book that I have been mispronouncing my whole life. And I would read through and I wouldn't flub, and the sound engineer would go, I don't think that's how you pronounce that word. I'm like, well, how do you pronounce it then? And she would correct me. I'm like, I guess I'll redo the paragraph then.
Oh my gosh.
And then the other one is this sound studio was right across from Taco Deli. And she told me ahead of time, listen, you need to get some food in you because otherwise we're going to hear your stomach in the afternoon. So I went in and went over to Taco Deli. I probably had too many tacos. I came back and I started recording. An hour in, every 12 minutes, she'd have to stop me because you could hear my stomach digesting the food. We lost so much time because of those tacos, but they were delicious.
That's crazy. What I remember the most is no matter if you asked me to ad lib something for 3 hours, I could probably do it. I could tell a story and it sounds right. But if you ask me to read, and what I found is you had to read the sentence that you're reading out loud, but you also had to, in advance, read the next sentence so you could put the two sentences together without sounding like a flipping robot.
Right. Where does a sentence end? Or is it a comma and you have to keep going? I know.
The other thing was I got dry mouth so bad. And there was and they warned me that there was going to be at some point where you just can't get the word out. There was a word, I forget the word. Let's pretend it's entrepreneur. I couldn't say the word entrepreneur. I couldn't do it. I changed the word in my book, Sam. I went back and changed the word so that it read properly. It was great. Anyway.
I can relate to all of that.
So there you go. As you can tell, my guest today is my good friend, Sam Goodner. He has a degree from Texas A&M, but he immigrated from Switzerland.
I'm an Aggie.
Which we're going to get into. I know there's a story there, I'm quite sure. He was at Dell early in his career, and then he co-founded a company called Catapult Systems, which he sold in 2014. He is also an Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year, which is, if there's one thing business-wise I'm envious of, I'm envious of the EY guys, and I can tell you why as we go. And currently, among other endeavors, he's on several boards, and he's a partner and coach at Freescale Systems, Freescale Coaching Systems.
Yeah.
Welcome to Unlocking Moves, Sam Goodner. We finally made it happen.
We are here. Good to be here.
Awesome, man. So excited. So, hey, there's so many things we can dive into. I think going from Switzerland to A&M, I got to hear that story. Going from Dell to launching your own business and being an entrepreneur, I got to hear that story. But let's start even earlier. You grew up in Switzerland. I've got to ask a couple of questions about that. You were in the Swiss Army. Tell me a little bit about how you ended up coming to the U.S.
Yeah. Well, I'll go back even further. So both of my parents were originally from the States. They moved to Europe when I was 1, so I didn't have a choice. My sister was born there. It was going to be just a 3-year work assignment for my father, and they fell in love with Europe. And they decided we're going to raise our family in Switzerland. So eventually they renounced their U.S. citizenship, became Swiss citizens, not an easy feat. And so my sister and I both inherited the Swiss citizenship, which for men in Switzerland comes with compulsory military service after high school. So we went to all the local schools. I grew up speaking English at home and French and German in school. And then after high school, had to serve. And that's why when I had the opportunity to go to college, one of the choices was I could come back to the States. I only, when you grow up in Europe, we only hear of the big name universities, right? We hear Harvard, Yale, MIT, Stanford, and I knew I was not going to get into any one of those. But I was born in Houston. So I went to the page that started with Texas, and I checked off the boxes for UT, A&M, and Texas Tech, sent in my international student application. I was accepted to all 3, but the A&M paperwork came back first. And I ended up going to A&M. And it was a beautiful choice by accident, if you want. But I really enjoyed my time there.
That's awesome. I did not know that you were born in the States. For some reason,
native Texan, yeah.
I love it. There you go. You learn something new every day. And growing up speaking English, German, and French. Can you still speak those? Probably French for sure.
For sure, French. I think of that as my mother tongue. And you learn a second language in most of Europe from a very young age. Yeah. So German is more my second language. And I can still speak German, although I'm rusty.
I took 4 semesters of German in college because we had a German exchange student when I was in high school. Went to see the Berlin Wall after graduating high school, the whole bit. And I speak about 3 sentences. I won't regale you with that. I had Matthias Illenfeld on a couple years ago, and I regaled him with my lack of German. Today's episode is brought to you by Chinook Seedery, the best sunflower seeds ever. Available online at ChinookSeedery.com and Amazon, or wherever you get your seeds, including Buc-ee's, Dick's Sporting Goods, Scheels, Love's Travel Stop, Circle K, and thousands of other locations around the country. Okay, so you got a job out of college. You went to Dell. Looked like you were a software developer for a couple of years.
I was.
Somehow, you launched your own business. I want to hear that story. And part of what we do at Unlocking Moves is really inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs. So what made you decide to make that leap?
So I was lucky. I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. My father was an entrepreneur. I sort of naturally assumed that's what everybody did at some point. So my first job out of college was actually in Kansas City, and then they sent me back to Europe to go help open their sales and support office in London.
With Dell?
That was with a company called Service Systems International, a small software company called SSI. And so I was working in London, knowing that at one point I wanted to start my own business eventually. So my best friend from A&M, a guy called David Jacobson, still my best friend to this day, he moved to Austin to come work for Lockheed Martin. So I was in London, he was in Austin. We went on a scuba diving trip together. We talked about our big plans of starting this technology company together someday. And I'm like, listen, we can't do this if we live in two different continents. Either you have to move to London or I'm going to have to move to Austin. And Austin won us over. So I moved here. I needed a job because I didn't have any income. So I found a job with Dell Computer Corporation. We all know Dell. And then, I moved here specifically to eventually start a company someday. And David and I were the third partner, started that company just a couple of years later.
Nice. And tell me a little bit about Catapult Systems. I know you were, I believe, a Microsoft integrator, if that's the right word.
So not at first, right? We just had a burning desire to be entrepreneurs. Okay. We had no idea what that was going to be like. Both of us were software developers, and our third co-founding partner, Jim Martin, was also a software developer. And so we thought we would be the next Microsoft, that we would build we had all these product ideas, but no money. And it didn't take an advanced degree in accounting to realize, well, and this is the early 90s. This is 1993. This is before you could go, three enterprising young men could go raise buckets of venture capital money. That didn't exist back then. So we did the math and we're like, we don't have enough starting capital to build these software products. We had $17,000 between the three of us in our company bank account. But we all knew a lot about building systems using this new computing paradigm called client server. It was the thing beyond mainframe computing that was all the rage at the time. And we're like, I bet companies would pay us to help them figure that out. And so we became accidentally a consulting company.
Did you even know what you were doing?
No. Because most people that start consulting companies, they come from Accenture or Deloitte, or they've done it in the past. We didn't even know the word. But we found clients and we started building systems for them, all the while taking all the profits from all those professional services gigs and funneling them into all these product ideas that we had. And we built our first product called Advanced Power Tools, and a product called PowerDoc. And then our flagship product, Inquisit, that was in 1997. It was our big success. It became its own company. Eventually it had its own successful exit 10 years later. But along the way, we had accidentally built this successful IT consulting firm. Now, we got lucky because first it was client server, then the internet happened and everybody wanted to build web-based applications. We learned a lot about how to do that. And then it was Y2K remediation. Remember that? Everybody had to go rewrite all their old mainframe applications into something more modern. And so we rode this wave of technology demand, not knowing anything about what we were doing. Which is why, by the way, it all came crashing down with the dot-com bust in 2000. We can talk about that later if you want, but yeah, that.
I do want to get into that because that sounds like a good gory story I need to hear.
It's definitely the gory story.
But listen, along the way, there's many out there that say, oh, you got lucky with whatever it is, with the, like you said, client server, with the shift to the cloud, whatever it was. And the reality is you took the leap and you figured it out. And I like to tell people with my consulting company, I would always tell my team, we never do what we can't do. We never say we could do what we can't do, but we often do what we haven't done, right? You're making this shit up. And that's just a reality of most professional services. You got to be able to figure it out and solve your client's needs. But you stayed abreast of what was going on in the industry. So as things pivoted, you were able to ride that wave, as you said. With mine, it was Sarbanes-Oxley.
Yeah,
was a big shift for us. And my partners were really smart and good at it. And I was smart enough to hitch my wagon to them, and I had my own skills. But it's pretty amazing if you stay abreast of the rules as they change, and you're able to spot opportunities and continue to take that leap.
Well, and the nice thing about building a professional services firm is you really can self-fund it. You can bootstrap a professional services firm because you're going to get income in almost immediately. That's very difficult to do if you're building, a semiconductor manufacturer plant or a car. Now the of course, the downside is that there's really, for everyone else, there's also no barrier to entry for them. So
limited competition.
Anybody can go start a professional services firm. Very few of them actually manage to scale one.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the crash. It sounds like you were riding a wave there in the late 90s, because this started in
93 when we got started. Yep.
There you go. And so you were doing well. You had how many employees at the time? Give me some context.
Well, I mean, we grew eventually to about 450 employees when we sold the company 20 years later.
Before the crash.
And for the crash, probably around 100 and 110.
Okay, so you're a legit firm. I mean, you're doing, I'm guessing 20 million or so in revenue, 15
something
to 20
like
million.
that. Yeah.
And there's tell me about that, dude. Let's go. Tell me, don't hold anything back.
Well, you remember the time. So in about mid 2000 is when this .com bubble came crashing down. I had never lived through a recession professionally. The last one that happened, I was probably in high school or college, so it didn't impact me. So I didn't even know what one of those looked like. I thought the music was going to keep playing forever. So we were woefully unprepared for what came. And within a period of 6 months, we lost half of our customers. We had a big concentration of customers that were startups because they were heavily VC funded. They had all the money. They needed our services, were willing to pay any premium for what we could offer. And then so many other businesses just decided we're going to tighten our belts. The first thing that goes are IT projects. And so, we lost half of our revenue in less than 6 months. I had to lay off about a third of the company. And then I had a second layoff after 9/11.
And you're 29 years old at the time. You're not like a senior.
This is the first time. This was hard, because everybody was a friend. We had a really amazing culture. I knew everybody's name. I knew their kids' names. I knew their spouse's name. And I made every call myself one weekend. And it was brutal. I mean, talk about, like with my head down. And then everybody that stayed, we had to take draconian measures. I mean, everybody took a pay cut. We moved into the basement of our building, and we tried to sublet everything else. I mean, we were surviving on rations. And there, by the way, we got lucky. Again, luck plays a big factor. I think people underestimate how much luck plays a factor. If we had just been an IT services firm, we would have gone out of business. Luckily, we had built this software products company, Inquisit, and we can talk more about that later if you want. And they had a recurring revenue model, kind of a software as a service model, where those contracts actually were still, we kept bringing in money with them. And it was thanks to them and that cash flow model that we were able to survive as a combined company through mid 2003, when once again the economy came back, that we had the wind in our sails, and then then from there, we grew exponentially.
So let's hold on the next part, because I think that is important to have a diversity of income streams so you could carry each other. I'm sure there were times along the way where the software company is like, dang, these guys are holding us back, or vice versa, but it sounds like a symbiotic relationship. But tell me about those calls.
Yeah.
Because look, bad times happen to a lot of folks. A lot of us handle things, some with class, some without, some with dignity, some without, some in a panic, some without. Tell me what you learned along the way with that as a human being and as a leader.
Yeah. So this is where transparency really pays dividends. So we always had a culture of being completely transparent. Like at every company meeting, we would share financials with all of our employees. They would know, they knew the good, the bad, and the ugly. We celebrated the wins. We also, talked about the losses. And so I think that culture of transparency paid dividends when you have to make the tough call, because all you can do then as the leader is say, listen, this is the situation. Yeah. And I have to make really, really brutal decision. I know this is going to be really difficult for you and your family. And we're going to do everything that we can. We're trying, we make the decision now so I can give you as much runway as we can, as much severance as I can. But this is the reality. I mean, there were tears, there were, in some cases there was some anger. There's always a range of emotions. And there was a lot of understanding though. There was a lot of, I know it's a tough decision, man, I wish it wasn't happening to me, but I get it. Huh. But man, that was a tough weekend.
Is there anything that you wish you had done different?
Well, about the layoffs or before that?
Let's say both, but the human side of me wants to know about the layoffs, but obviously the business side, I'm sure there was something before. And here's why I ask, and I'll just put this out there for So you show a little vulnerability. So we sold our company to a company called Tatum, and I was the leader now, probably underqualified for leading a group of a couple hundred people or whatever it was nationwide. And we had a technology leader that at some point in the whatever time frame that was, mid 2000s, I was asked to terminate this guy.
Yeah.
And he wasn't a friend, but I like to have good relationships with my people. And I got talked into bring HR in there, say it as few words as possible, march him out the door. And I'm like, that doesn't feel right, but okay, I'll do it. And I did it. And I still feel sick to this day of the way I treated this man who was a couple of years older than me, had a family. And I wish I had done it different. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So I did it the way you wish you had done it. And again, because these were my friends, I had no HR on.
You didn't have corporate HR.
So I mean, I had a head of HR, but she wasn't part of any of these calls. It had to come from me personally. It really mattered. After the first 10, it starts getting out. And so when people are getting a call from you over the weekend, the messages spread very quickly. They're like, I think I know what's coming.
Yeah.
Listen, I didn't have to fake anything because my heart was broken. You can hear my voice. I mean, still to this day, like it was really hard. Yeah. And if you're being honest and genuine and you're not trying to pinch a penny or like you're just doing what you have to do. It's my job to save the company. And unfortunately, this is a decision we had to make as an executive team, but I'm going to own it and I'm going to make that call. I'm not going to delegate that to HR. We're not going to just get everybody in a room and say, you guys are the unlucky few. Like it was really, and now again, it was still at a size where, the 35 people I called that weekend, I could still manage it.
Yeah.
It's a different situation if Dell's laying off 5,000 people.
Right.
Obviously that's going to be a different norm, but no, I don't know that I would do anything differently.
Yeah. Well, man, thanks for sharing that. I see it still impacts you today. And I think that's just part of being a human.
Yeah.
Well, let's flip to the tremendous growth. You mentioned exponential growth after some period after the .com. So you were able to keep the company together.
Yeah.
You made the tough decisions. It cost a few people their jobs, but it saved another 60 or 70 people their jobs. And then you made something out of it. Tell me about that.
So I'll go back to the middle of the .com bust because what we realized in the middle of that is that we were unremarkable as a company. We looked like everyone else because when, in the craze of the 90s, we didn't have to be anything special.
Yeah.
I mean, there was just so much more work than there was qualified people to deliver it. Our strategy at the time was if we can just find, attract, and retain the best people, then it's a win. And that was a nice strategy. But suddenly when all of our clients were pinching pennies, we look like everyone else out there. So we did a lot of soul searching in the middle of this. We were forced to do a lot of soul searching. And the question was, how do we stand out? What can we be best in the world at? What is our unfair advantage? And we did a lot of soul searching. We're like, we have to focus. We have to specialize. We have to set ourselves apart from everyone else and be known for something that when I leave a conversation with a client, they're going to know, oh, if I have this kind of project, I'm going to call Catapult Systems. And so after looking left and right and industry vertical and horizontal, we decided, you know what, we're going to hitch our wagon to this Microsoft train. And we're going to one day become the number one Microsoft partner in the world. So we're going to focus everything that we do at becoming a fantastic Microsoft, not just custom application development shop, but systems integrator and even network integrator. Because we had to learn what was important to Microsoft. So we made the very strategic decision of within a year, we will jettison all of our non-Microsoft work.
Wow.
That was a tough decision to make, by the way. We're going to give, our non-Microsoft clients a year to, go find someone else. We were only going to hire, train, and retain Microsoft certified consultants. So everyone in our company went through a retooling process over the course of a year. And then we were only going to sell Microsoft solutions going forward. But that key strategic decision, by the time a year and a half later, in 2003, again, the wind was once again in our sails. It was so clear what we were going after. And we said no to anything that was not right at the center of our target. And that discipline allowed us, it's counterintuitive because you think, well, if you cast a wider net, you're going to grow faster. Actually, the opposite is true. The more you have a tight net and a tight focus, and you know who your customer is, not just the size organization, but exactly what you can offer them. And no one could compete with us. in that space because we had Microsoft standing next to us going, well, all they do is Microsoft, consulting services. So we're going to recommend them every single time. It was hard to lose, frankly.
Wow.
And so that focus, that specialization, that unfair advantage allowed us to grow to, like I said, about 450 in employees. By the time we sold the business, it was late 2013. And by the way, there was another recession that happened in 2008, if you remember, a seemingly bigger recession worldwide than just the dot-com bust. Well, we were maniacally focused on becoming recession-proof. And so there's a whole bunch of strategies that we put in place. I promised myself that I would never be caught with my pants down again because I just now knew it was a matter of when, not a matter of whether there's going to be another recession. It's just a matter of when. Yeah. And so you fast forward to 2008, not a single layoff, not a single pay cut. We were profitable all 2008, 2009, and 2010. All we did was slow down our growth.
Wow.
So we were ready for the next time it came around.
And I love the story of focus. I'm a jack of all trades, so I like to have a lot of things going on. And every time I've had that opportunity to just focus on one thing, I want to do it all. And it's probably definitely cost me some scale. I promise you that.
Yeah.
That's good advice. Okay. Well, let's shift gears. We can talk a little bit more about Catapult if you want, but I think it's going to tie in with what you did with the book, Like Clockwork.
Yeah.
And some of the lessons that you talk about there and maybe how you grew to 450 people with Catapult. I'll just say that my favorite couple of things that jumped out at me with the book was one, I'll say maniacal focus on systems as opposed to people. And as a people person that was in the recruiting business for 15 years, I'm a people person, but I preach that that person can build the systems because I'm not a builder of systems. And most of entrepreneurs that I worked with weren't. And the other was the idea of first impressions. And you bring in a new employee for the first day, and how it sounds like at Dell you had a tough experience, but at Catapult you wanted to make sure they were treated very, very well, and you gave them gifts. And I always relate that to when someone leaves employment. There's always a happy hour and a party and a going away and good luck, Sam. That person just quit your job, right? Let's welcome the people that are coming to Catapult, for example. Welcome, Sam. We're really excited to have you. So tell me about the book, but any of those points.
Well, first of all, you mentioned systems. I'm a big believer in systems. Most of our systems were people-focused systems. So actually, they're not mutually exclusive whatsoever, including what the chapter you mentioned is called First Day. It's actually the first chapter of my book. We built an entire system about how do we make sure to make that first day, first week, first month of all of our new employees something completely memorable. Because you've seen this many times I'll relate to my experience at Dell, which is very common for most new employees. Yeah. So I show up for my first day at Dell. I walk into the lobby. I walk up to the receptionist and I'm like, hey, I'm Sam Goodner. It's my first day here. I'm excited. It's a big day for me. And she's like, oh, do you know who your manager is? I'm like, oh, I'm not sure. It's like, well, go sit down over there. Let me find out. And so, a few calls later, 30 minutes later, it's not my manager that shows up, it's HR. And she's like, well, your manager's not here today, but we have a bunch of paperwork for you to fill out. So just come in this little conference room, fill this out. And then I was done and they're like, well, we have nothing for you to do. So go ahead and go home today. I'm like, wow, that really is unimpressive. So you contrast that with when any new employee at any one of our offices around the country would show up, there was a huge banner with their name in the lobby. It said, welcome, John Smith. They walk up and the receptionist was like, John, we've been waiting for you. Welcome to Catapult Systems. Your manager will be right down. Awesome. And the manager brings them to their desk, and the desk has a bunch of balloons and confetti and Catapult swag laid out, t-shirts and mugs and coffee cups and all that. They have a laptop that's already fully installed, running with a valid login and password on a sticky note in front of them. All the paperwork, of course, is online. And then the manager brings them to their office for an hour, explains sort of how things work, in his or her department, and then walks them around and introduces them to the whole team. And then the manager takes them out to lunch. And then that afternoon, they're immediately put on a project. Day one, there's no going home early because employees want to know what they'll be doing. Yeah. Then the rest of the week, they have lunch with the whole team. Then I would typically, if they're at headquarters, I would have lunch with them within the first 3 weeks. By the time they got home on the first day, if they were married, they received a big tin can full of full of chocolate chip cookies with our logo on top of it and said, "Welcome to Catapult Systems," and a letter from the manager to the spouse saying, "We're so excited that your wife or husband has joined our firm.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see you at the next Catapult Fun event."
Nice.
And so they would go home and go, "You would not believe what just happened to me at work." And their spouse would go, "Well, you wouldn't believe what just came in the mail." So that's the kind of impression you want. But mainly, you don't want them to be thinking about their old job and start thinking about, oh, maybe did I really, should I have left that company? Because, as a being a recruiter for a long time, when is the window that that the previous employer calls their old employer and said, "Hey, Kurt, you sure you don't want to come back?"
Yeah.
And that's the first few weeks.
Well, that is gold. If you're listening here and you have a company or you recruit people, treat them like royalty and just treat them like human beings. How would you want to be treated on your first day? It doesn't have to be royalty, but it's a great way to make a first impression.
Yeah.
And the tidbit about the spouse is just amazing, because then you get the spouse bought in. And now when they start having a rough day at work, the spouse has at least got a good first impression from their experience with Catapult.
So I have a whole chapter in my book entitled "Get the Families Involved." And one of the things we recognize early on, by the way, the military knows this. If you look at the U.S. military, and by the way, this is the only chapter in my book where I don't tell a Swiss Army story, because we don't have that same equivalent. We don't have bases all over the world. Yeah. Everybody goes home at the end of the day in the Swiss Army. So a friend of mine talks about her story and her time in the Air Force with her husband, who was a pilot, and their 3 kids, and how the U.S. Air Force went out of the way to make families feel welcome at every base that they were moving to, and help them move and help them acclimate and find schools and all that. So we did something very similar at Catapult, where we had very specific programs in place. Again, people-centered systems that were designed to make sure that the spouses and families were included. We call them our extended Catapult family. So every one of our fun events, once a month, the spouses were always invited. Most of our fun events, the families were invited. Once a year, in all of our offices, we took all of our employees and their families to Six Flags on a Saturday, all expenses paid. We had a newsletter that we would send out on a quarterly basis to the spouses so that they would sort of know what was going on with the company. And I could go on and on and on. My favorite event that we did was once a year we had Catapult Kids Day. Again, across all of our offices, our HR team and a bunch of volunteers would organize it. And all the kids ages 5 to 15, we'd bring them into the office, and we'd have a theme and t-shirts for them and an activity, whether it was an entrepreneurial activity or building Lego catapults or you name it. And they just spent all day at the office, and they'd go see where their parents worked and all that. I've had employees tell me, "Listen, when I finally decided to leave Catapult, it was really a decision. I had to sit my family down and make sure that, it was because it had to be a family decision."
Yeah.
Employees where their spouse and their family feel like they're part of what you're doing every day at work, our retention was crazy through the roof, right? We had really low employee turnover.
Wow. That's awesome. I think that's so important. And you learn most of these lessons, it sounds like, through the Swiss Army, but not that one.
That's the one chapter of the 30 in my book where I wanted to tell my friend's story, because I think the U.S. military does this particularly well. And by the way, in the U.S. military, they also realize that, every 4 years, your servicemen and women have to re-enlist, right? It's a 4-year term, and they've done the math. If your serviceman or woman is married, their chances of re-enlisting go up by a whole order of magnitude.
Really? Something
like that. I mean, the numbers are crazy. So they really love it if they have families.
I love it. So what other principles do you want to make sure we highlight? I've got a couple in mind, but tell me if there are other key elements of the book that you want to highlight. I know you speak about this a lot.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that jump out at people?
So the book is really about operational scalability. And I think most companies that are, they're going to, at some point, they hit a plateau. And that's usually around 10, 12 people and, 2 to 3 million in revenue. And they sort of stagnate and hit that plateau. And the reason for that is, oftentimes it's twofold. Number one, the founder is still in the middle of all the decisions because he or she hasn't learned how to let go of that. Because instinctively, when you're the founder, you've had to make every decision.
Yep.
And then when you start building a team around you, it's not natural for you to just say, well, you now own this part of our business. You don't have to come ask me for, my opinion anymore. They have to learn that. It's a learned skill. And then the other one is, no startup actually spends any time codifying their best practices. So like because if there's 10 of us, we're all working in the same room. Why would I write anything down?
Yeah.
Because you can hear every one of my conversations. When you start scaling and you want to hire people that haven't been with you since the beginning, they need to know what good looks like in their part of the business. And until you've taken the time to really go codify that, and yes, you're going to write it down. You're going to create a playbook for every part of your business, right? Imagine joining a football team as a new quarterback, and you just thrown out in the middle of the game and you say, just go play, Johnny.
Just figure it out.
Like, okay, what are the plays? What's the playbook? Yeah. And it's the same thing in business. So you can't really scale beyond a certain point until one, the founder is truly willing to decentralize decision-making. And two, you're willing to codify your best practices so you can train your employees on what that looks like.
Yeah. I love the analogy. I believe it's codify, by the way.
By the way, see, that's a word that, see, by the way, that's one of those words.
That's why
that they caught me on at the audiobook. It's codify, isn't it?
It is.
See, my whole life I've been saying codify. Codify. Thank you for correcting me.
It makes sense to be codified because you're basically creating. I just said that just to give you shit.
I appreciate it.
Okay. So let's talk a bit about what happened after, because I know the story. You sold the company, and part of the reason I believe you sold it at the time you did is so you could match up with the sale of your ex-wife's company.
Yeah.
So you could take your two kids on a family around the world trip. I also know how painfully organized and structured you are, and you had this freaking thing planned for, I believe, several years prior. So tell me about that. 13 months around the world with a 6 and a 9-year-old, Sam, Jackson, and Catherine. Tell me about that.
Well, and of course, you know my ex-wife very well, Caroline. I mean, we've known each other for almost 30 years now. And so we both had an international experience growing up. I grew up in Switzerland. At one point, when she was 12, 13, her family had an assignment in the UK, and those were very formative years. And both of us wanted to make sure when we started thinking about having a family of our own, that our kids had an international exposure. We wanted to make sure that our kids did not think that Westlake was the center of the universe. And so initially we thought about, well, at one point, let's just go do what she did, which is let's go live somewhere for a year or two, put our kids in local schools, and that'll give them an exposure to something other than, our Texas-centric universe. And we decided, well, for that to be, meaningful for them, it has to be young enough to where they're not going to hate us for removing them from their social network. Like, good luck doing that with a 15-year-old in high school, but also old enough to remember the experience. So we thought maybe the ideal age is 9 and 11 if we ever have two. And so the year that our son was born, 2003, we literally 10 years out put 2013 on the calendar for that's when we want to leave for this trip around the world. So when it's 10 years out, it's sort of just, it's something you talk about every once in a while. You're not really making any concrete plans, but 5 years out, suddenly it's like more real when both of you are running companies. So we both agreed it would be, all else being equal, it would be ideal if neither one of us were fully committed to at work so that we could really enjoy this experience. By the way, that experience shifted from living one place for a year to, we could never decide on where that would be. We decided, well, instead, why don't we add the element of homeschooling our kids and let's travel everywhere. Let's circumnavigate the globe. We ended up going to 34 countries in 13 months. We homeschool our kids, which, by the way, at that age, it's just reading, writing, and math.
You probably got a lot further along than they did at elementary school.
They did. Listen, we use Khan Academy for math, by the way, big fan. And then they read 50 books on their iPads, and we worked with an elementary school teacher back here in Austin to give them writing assignments. And they did 3 years of math in one. They came back reading and writing at a high school level, going into middle school. And that was 1.5 hours a day. That's it.
And think about the life experience those kids got for that 1 year adventure.
They both love to travel, that's for sure.
That's pretty amazing. So I know not everybody can take an around the world trip for a transition.
Yep.
Tell me what other things you might have learned during your transition, during a quasi sabbatical, anything else you want to, because I'm in the middle of I should have been done already with a sabbatical, but I'm also working more than I wanted to with a sabbatical, as you know. So tell me what I can have my listeners learn from your transition or sabbatical experience.
Yeah, so I've retired twice now. It doesn't stick.
So you suck at it. Okay.
I suck at retiring. So By the way, it's cathartic to switch off your work email from your previous, previous company. Because I went from 500 emails a day to 5, and 3 of those are from my mother. So that's cathartic. And so finding a way to unplug from all that extra chatter was really helpful. And then you've done this, I'm sure. And then I had this long list of books that had been, waiting for me to read, that people had recommended over the years, just collecting dust.
Yeah.
So I downloaded all of those to my iPad and just had a nice, real regimen of reading, sort of outside of my core space, which I found really fascinating. So I did a lot more reading than I had, but mainly I had the chance to focus on my family. So, when you've always done a great job being the coach to all your kids' teams and being really involved. And I did my best, raising my kids as well. But we work a lot. When you're building a company, you travel a lot. These are the sacrifices you end up making. So I really wanted to spend as much focused time as I could, at least for that year.
Yeah.
And no regrets, man. I have this amazing relationship with both of my kids that I think in large part I attribute to that special time we spent 24/7 together for 13 months.
Wow. That's awesome. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing now.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't just give it up. I know you're still working pretty hard, if I remember correctly. So tell me what's going on with Sam Goodner.
So 3 years ago, my daughter graduated from high school. I took that opportunity it was time for me to retire from Flash Parking, that last company that I helped scale. And I retired to go write that book you've referenced, Like Clockwork, because I'd been keeping notes on it for 25 years. So I'm like, this is the perfect opportunity for me to go, move from Westlake to downtown. I'm an empty nester now. Yeah. Go retire from running operations at Flash Parking and go write that book, which I took a few months to do nothing except, mess around a bit. And then I went and focused on writing the book, which was actually such a fun experience. I really enjoyed it more than I thought I was going to do. But now all of that sort of last year, all the book promotion and all of that, it made Amazon bestseller, by the way. And so all of that sort of promotion around the book and all those speaking engagements sort of were beginning to wind down. Yeah. And a longtime friend of mine, Rich Manders, who was also a serial entrepreneur for 30 years, 10 years ago, retired from running companies to start a small business coaching practice with his friend Wayne. And they've been doing really, really well. And I found out last year that his friend Wayne was retiring. And so I casually just dropped my name in the hat going, this is something I've been considering doing. And man, Rich has been all over it. So since last year, I've joined Rich in his coaching practice. And yeah, we work with companies typically ranging from like 20 million to 200 million in revenue. And one of us coaches their CEO, or typically the visionary. The other one of us coaches their integrator, or typically their president or COO. And then we facilitate all of their, quarterly executive planning meetings. And man, I'm having the time of my life, because all these companies are in different industries. Yeah. They're all at different stages of sort of, execution health. And it gives me the opportunity to bring like my 30 years of making mistakes to helping them build some of these scaling up processes to take their company to the next level. So I'm having a blast.
That's awesome. I love, first thing that jumps out is that company will never scale. It's just the two of you, and that's okay.
Oh, this is a lifestyle business.
That's the beautiful thing about it. You're doing what you enjoy. You don't need to make a ton of money, but you're probably doing pretty darn well with it. And you're making a big impact on those entrepreneurs and those companies and all the families associated with it. The ripple effect that you're making is quite tremendous.
Listen, when you can take like your 30 years of experience and help accelerate the growth of another company, it's a really fantastic feeling. Like I actually feel I'm really making a difference, which is so much fun. And no, for sure, we don't want to scale this business. This is just purely for us to go give back to the entrepreneurial world and have something intellectually challenging to go do. It's not about making money or growing the business.
Well, I can't wait for you to put your name in the hat for Chinook board member. So we'll be all over that for you. So, hey, we're at the point of the show where I've got to ask you about your unlocking move or moves.
Yeah.
There's a couple I heard in there. What's the one that jumps out at you?
So I'm going to go with the business one. I have many personal ones. On the business side, my biggest unlocking move is when I realized that I was the bottleneck. And by that point, by the way, we were already a fairly large company. I've been holding on way too long. And this is what happened. Like it happened to me, not because of my incredible insights and wisdom. In early 2000, this is before actually the dot-com crash happened. In early 2000, I got a call from my father. He was living in Munich, Germany at the time, and he told me that he was diagnosed with cancer and that the doctors had given him 6 months to live. So I did what any son would do. I went to my team, my executive team, and I said, listen, I'm going to go to Munich, and I need to spend time with my father. I don't know, it's going to be at least a month. And during that time, it's going to be very difficult to reach me. This was before we had Zoom, we had email,
right.
But this is before we had, an international call costs a fortune. And so my executive team looked at me, and said, well, how are we going to make decisions? First of all, I was surprised by that question. I'm like, well, you guys will figure it out. I trust you. And I'm like, okay. So I left for Germany, spent that time with my father. It was really actually an amazing time. The cancer did end up taking his life, but not until 8 years later. So we had more time with him than the doctors initially thought, which was a gift.
Right.
And it was an amazing time I had with him in Munich. But when I came back, to Catapult Systems, well, things weren't just running well, they were running better than when I left. Because what had happened? Well, everyone had to start stepping up and owning their own decisions, taking initiative, taking responsibility. And they had to level up, and then their teams had to level up. So everyone leveled up in the business, and they were doing it. They weren't doing it the exact same way that I would have done it, but it was better.
Yeah.
Now, initially, my ego took a little bit of a hit. I'm like, and then then I remembered. Well, I hired all these people for a reason because they're better than me at their thing. And so it took a slap in the face for me to be gone for a while to come back and realize, man, I have been holding this company back. And it's not that I wanted to. It's not that I wanted to be a micromanager, but I was so used to it. And people were just used to coming and asking me for permission all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was my big unlocking move.
Dude, there's such powerful lessons there. The more we hold on, the more we let people use us as the ultimate arbiter, the more it keeps us from scaling. And I think the fact that you had the ego involved, I appreciate you mentioned that because it's true. And most of my listeners have the ego involved to a certain extent. But if we can just release many of these things, your team is not going to do it the same way you do. They might not even do it as well as you do initially, but give them the chance and you're going to be really amazed at, and for people like me, I felt guilty when I wasn't working as hard as I was before.
Oh yeah.
So I would find ways to, get myself back in the middle of things, but that's being guilty for not having to work as hard as you were before. I could use my mind for more strategic thinking as opposed to a lot of the tactical things I had wasted.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Well, thanks for sharing that. So I've got two other questions.
Yep.
One's I call the listener's advocate question, and I'll start with that one. That is, if I'm a listener, I've got a conversation here with Sam Goodner, and obviously they're not, what would I want Kurt to ask Sam? So the one that I came up with is Swiss Army knife. Is that bullshit, or is there really a fucking knife in the Swiss military?
So we are issued a Swiss Army knife, and it is made by, we have two companies that make the official knife. One is called Victorinox, the other one is called Wenger. And you can buy, the ones you see in shops, they're one of those two brands. So we do get one. It's not the red plastic cover. It's actually all metal, so it's silver.
Okay.
And so yes, we are issued a Swiss Army knife. And I know 12 ways to kill you with one.
Does it have this corkscrew for the wine bottle?
So no. So which is funny because the one that's issued does not have a corkscrew because no. And so we jokingly in the Swiss Army, when you have a civilian one with a corkscrew, we call it the officer's knife.
All right. Well, I knew my listeners would. I'd have to ask that question. I'm sure you've been asked a million times. Okay. The next one is a trick question. What is one question you're never asked that either you wish they would ask or you're kind of secretly glad that they don't?
Oh, that I'm secretly glad.
I've got a couple teed up. But
all right. Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Go ahead. Tee one up for me.
Well,
I'm going to regret this decision.
No, you're not. I got to.
The question is, what's my favorite color? I wish people would ask me that more often.
Well, your color's black. I saw you in black today. Okay. Now, what is one thing you like to find out about a young entrepreneur if you're thinking about investing in them, or you meet them, they ask you for advice?
Oh, it's always the same question.
Okay.
My question to them is, okay, tell me, what is your unfair advantage? Or what are you best in the world at? Or aspire to become best in the world at someday? And that's a hidden way to say, tell me how you're different than everybody else in your industry. And most young entrepreneurs don't know how to answer that question. And that's pivotal. How are you differentiated than, how are you setting yourself to be different than anybody else around you? Because about winning is not about being better, it's about being different. And if they can articulate that well, man, I'm paying attention.
It's funny, as an investor, I agree with you. As a inspirer of entrepreneurs, I tell people, you don't have to be that different. You could just be really good at what you do, and you could build a nice business and be a successful entrepreneur. So, for example, I do a lot of.
You asked me specifically as an investor.
So I do a lot of work at the high school incubator program. I do judging at the college here at UT program, and the college in particular, they want companies that are unicorn potential. And they if you're not the next, Uber, then you're a failed entrepreneur. And I tell people that's bullshit, because you can be a very successful entrepreneur. There were other people in the computer business when you launched Catapult Systems.
So by the way,
you were the first person.
Yeah, I knew none of that when I started my business. But let me give you an example. So when I say best in the world, I don't necessarily mean the whole world. I mean, what is your world?
Your world.
So I would contend that Swedish Hill Bakery, you know them well, in Clarksville, Texas, that they are the best in the world at being a bakery in Clarksville, Texas. And their unfair advantage is a combination of their recipes, their location, and their oven. They're a bakery. There's a million bakeries.
Yep.
And yet, in that market, when you think of what bakery am I going to go to in Clarksville, it's just them.
I love
so
it.
I don't care what you do. You can define your own world, your own space, but stand out. Be different than everybody else. Be the best in the world at something in the space that you want to own.
I love it. The follow-up question I might ask a lot of entrepreneurs is, why do you do what you do? What is your passion? Why are you fired up about it? And do you have the stick-to-itiveness to go weather the downturns?
So are you asking me that question?
Just a general observation of young entrepreneurs.
Yeah, that's a great question for them. And I do want to know what motivates them. And of course, I always, I never like to hear the answer, well, I just want to go make a ton of money.
Right.
I think if you do the right things for the right reasons, the money will come. I'm such a believer in that. It doesn't mean you don't have to have an exit strategy. It doesn't mean that when you have investors if you have investors, by definition, at some point you want to monetize their investment. So you have to think through what an exit strategy looks like. But if that's your only goal and you think that that's the end goal, then you're not going to get there. Like you have to be passionate about solving a real problem for real customers. If you're passionate about solving that problem, you're going to do well financially. If you just want to do well financially, you're going to suck at all this.
1,000%. I think one begets the other, and it starts with the before the money. Money is happens.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
I love it. Hey, how else can we connect with you? Is it LinkedIn? What's the best way to connect with Sam Goodner?
So easy. Of course, I'm on LinkedIn. You can go to samgoodner.com if you want to find out more about the book or my work, all that. And the book is called Like Clockwork, Run Your Business with Swiss Army Precision, on Amazon, on Audible, on Kindle or paperback, hard copy, whatever you want.
I love it. Like Clockwork. Great book. Great visiting with you today. And on that note, Sam Goodner, we're going to wrap this puppy up. Thank you so much for joining me on Unlocking Moves. And for everybody out there, I'm going to ask you to please go give us a 5-star review, like, subscribe, share with your compadres. Sam, man, thanks so much for being with me on Unlocking Moves.
Such a pleasure.
Awesome.
Thanks, Kurt.
If you're an entrepreneur and you think you might have outgrown a member of your team, or maybe you've got a mic, as we talked about in Who's Your Mic, check out this quiz at who'syourmic.com/quiz. That's who'syourmic.com/quiz.